Okay. Yeah, the attendees are filtering in. We'll just give it another minute or so before we get started.
No
And
worries.
you are free to share anytime you want, Lisa.
Okay. I didn't want to take away from you, Mark.
No,
I want
that's all right.
I
Yeah.
want him to just focus in on your amazing self. So, but I will
Nothing to
put
take
this
away.
up. Let's see. I'm going to go back to this time. The question is, are any of the panelists loving pickleball by chance?
Say
Because
that again.
do you love pickleball by any chance? Pickleball? No.
No,
Obviously, Mark, the answer is no, because you did.
I didn't know what you're saying. Yeah, I know what it is, but
I
yeah.
was just watching pickleball yesterday in Texas, I think, on TV, and they have wins just like us that are having right now in Ohio. And it was funny because they were like the ball would literally go up in the air and then just like move over and drop. And it was like
Oh,
professional people playing for hundreds of thousands of dollars. And they were just like, no. It's very fun to watch, actually.
yeah, I bet that would be difficult. I know what the ball looks like. It's pretty
Yeah,
long.
it's a wiffle ball. I mean, it's a plastic, wiffle ball, so it moves.
Yeah, Lisa, I thought of you. My daughter asked for a pickleball set for Easter this year, so I had
Ugh,
to buy that. So I guess I'm gonna get, my experience with pickleball finally. So
it's so fun. Anybody that's on there waiting for us to get started, if you haven't tried it, try it. It's amazing.
I know people love it.
I was gonna say, Lisa, my husband and I played tennis for 25 years, and then we
Mhm.
just tried pickleball last year, and it was really difficult for us to like
Yeah.
that flexible mindset to like do something different that's sort of like tennis, but not like tennis at all. And then when we go out and we still alternate now, like pickleball or tennis, and it
Yeah.
just takes us a little while to like, remember the rules for each one of them and get ourselves positioned. And but it is fun, and I think it's great for kids because it's not as strenuous and you're
Yeah.
closer to the net. And so my kids also love to play pickleball.
Yeah, I love it. And ex-tennis players are amazing pickleball players eventually. It really is. But it gets you where you have to play at the net and you get more
Hmm.
comfortable playing at the net, I think with pickleball quicker because the ball's not going to kill you and,
Yeah.
especially if you play with like 60-year-olds like myself. So you can
I
take
hear a
out
lot
all
of
your
people do
frustrations.
so. I've heard, yeah, including somebody in our office. I've heard that injuries can happen.
Oh yeah, I broke my wrist already 2 years ago. When my first year of pickleball, I fell and broke my wrist, but so far I'm good again. I was out there with my little after post surgery, I was out there playing because it was my left hand. I was like, I'm fine. So
Okay, well, I think we'll get started.
perfect.
Welcome, everyone. My name's Mark Weicker. I'm with Abdenor Weicker, one of the three independent organizations which have started and operated the clinic, the Special Education Legal Clinic. If you didn't know, the clinic is a public-private collaboration between these three organizations: Disability Rights Ohio, the Ohio Coalition for the Education of Children with Disabilities, and our law firm, Abdenor Weicker. The clinic is staffed by us volunteers, an advocate, Danielle is here. We used to have some law students and we do have some interns that help in the summer. But we also have guest speakers, and we'll have a couple guest speakers today, who I'll introduce. We always have the clinic on the third Monday of the month, barring holidays for the last 2 months. Um, but today we have home and community-based services, developmental disability waivers by the Ohio Association of County Boards of Developmental Disabilities. And our presenters today are Lisa Combs, who is the Service and Support Administrator Advisor, and Whitney Langston, who is the Youth Supports Advisor for the Ohio Association of County Boards. A couple things before we get going on the presentation. This usually it lasts up to an hour, sometimes a little bit shorter. We will take a couple breaks to address any questions. And if you do have questions, please just drop them in the Q&A. If we can answer them, through text or type, we will do that. But otherwise, we'll answer the questions or have Lisa or Whitney answer the questions when we take a break. And closed captioning is available at the bottom. You can use that individually if you need it. That's the CC button at the bottom. And then if you've signed up for an individual guidance session, those follow this workshop, and those are on a separate Zoom link, so you should have gotten that separately. If you're signed up for an individual guidance session, those are on the half hour starting at 1 o'clock through 3 o'clock. Yeah, I think that's it. One other thing to note is that I mentioned that this is Home and Community-Based Services, Developmental Disabilities Waivers. That's the title of this workshop. This one is followed next month by a presentation by Disability Rights Ohio. And that's when waivers are denied, your options and rights, which again will be presented by DRO. So some questions that we might have, we may defer to that next workshop, but we'll try our best to get your questions answered today. So with that, I'll turn it over to Lisa and Whitney.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much, Mark. You teed that up perfect. So excited to be here, and I'm just excited to learn about your services that you guys give. This is Amy Freeman introduced me to potentially being a speaker here, and now I have one more place to send people when they need help. So thanks for having us. I'll introduce myself real quick, and then I'll let Whitney introduce herself. So I am Lisa Combs. You see my most important role in life is certainly a mom of 4 adult children, along with being the Ohio Association of County Boards SSA advisor since early 2020. Previous to that, I worked for Lucas County Board of Developmental Disabilities in multiple roles, including speech therapist, eligibility specialist, and then SSA or service and support advisor, or administrator, which is how I got to be working at OACB. So that is me. You'll see on my pictures, I put pictures. Whitney was unexpectedly not able to be available to prep for this meeting, so she didn't put pictures. And she probably doesn't need to be as public as I am. I am extremely public about my private life. But you can see that I have 3 adult children, and my son does receive county board services through the Lucas County Board of Developmental Disabilities. So I will probably share some personal experiences as a parent. I bring both the parent perspective as well as County Board and Ohio Association of County Boards perspective with me. So Whitney, if you want to introduce yourself. And I love pickleball. There you go, Whitney. You can tell them what you love.
All right. Well, thanks, Lisa. Hi, everyone. I'm Whitney Langston. And as Lisa mentioned, I am the Youth Supports Advisor with the Ohio Association of County Boards. I am a mom of 2 girls, teenage girls. And so they keep me very, very busy. And I also have worked in the field of developmental disabilities for the last 20 years. I've worked in multiple direct service roles, SSA, and then also supervisor of SSAs who support youth. And so that's kind of what led me to my position at OACB as the Youth Support Advisor. And, you know, a lot of my role there really is about supporting SSAs who are serving youth and kind of working with them through a lot of these different processes, including waivers and such. And so I am mostly here just to support Lisa and be helpful in answering questions today. So she put this beautiful presentation together and she will deliver it, but I am here as a support. So any questions that I can answer, I'm happy to. So thank you all for having me.
Thanks, Whitney. Yeah, Whitney, our positions are, I guess mine doesn't sound newish because it's been since 2020, but we did not, the Ohio Association of County Boards, I was the first person to be an SSA advisor. And I very quickly realized that the majority of county board services are supporting or SSAs, and therefore our association supports all 88 county boards of developmental disabilities. And so we have over 2,300 service and support administrators across Ohio. And I'm good, but I'm not that good, Whitney. So I started saying we need help. So Whitney has come on board, specifically working more with those SSAs that have youth. And my understanding is there's a good chance that a lot of you in the room today might have youth. And I certainly have a lot of passion for youth with disabilities. But I also work with adults throughout the lifespan and SSAs that support them. So let's go to a little bit. I'm going to start out a little bit not about waivers, but it all is very much feeds into waivers. And it's really important to understand county boards and how we get funding so that we can support those folks in our communities with disabilities. And we do that through what we call like local county board services, as well as waiver administration, which is, of course, what we're going to talk about in a few minutes. So just a couple facts. We're just kind of like laying the groundwork at this point. So across Ohio, there's approximately at the last count 117,000 Ohioans that are served through a local county board of DD, and that's 88 county boards of DD. That's who's eligible. That number changes. These numbers are probably a couple years old, probably more people now. Out of that 117,000, 50,000 of those are children. And it says receiving early supports. So I think that's probably even maybe within early intervention. I'm not sure, Whitney. We have an early intervention advisor also. So that is a very big support that we county boards give. It's super important to understand that any service, both the local services like early intervention or any of the services like you'll hear Special Olympics a lot of times, or potentially family support dollars, things like that. Those are all funded through either local property taxes. Now, any waiver is going to be funded through local property taxes, state resources, and federal Medicaid dollars. Local property taxes take care of when I talk about local resources. That's all coming from local property taxes. So we're really thankful. We got 20 people on here. Every one of you may or may not be a local property taxpayer, but we do really appreciate those services because that money goes directly back into the services we're talking about today. Broad overview, that county board serves early intervention and early childhood programs. Educational, some county boards still operate schools. I think approximately half of the county boards still operate schools across the state, and or family support services. So there's might be some other kind of either funding or a service that a county provides for children and families. So support and service that's actually worded wrong. It's supposed to be service and support administration. But service and support administration is a service that's available to people regardless of whether they have a waiver. So anybody that is 3 years and older can ask for a service and support administrator. It's kind of like a case management role where they're supporting the family, helping connect to any county board resources or community resources that are out there, and helping develop how to pay for those services that are in need. And sometimes that will be through a Medicaid waiver, sometimes not. So employment training and job coaching is offered at the local level completely. And also just linking with employment and job coaching. Some counties still do a little bit of both of that, but also other agencies do that. And then, of course, long-term for people that are adults, supported living, and residential services for folks. So all the information on these first 3 slides I give you are in a handout that we are creating that will be consistent message across. These are kind of the basics. I understand we have 88 counties and 88 ways of doing things, some people feel like, and we're really trying to work towards a common understanding of what are the basic services that you can expect in every single county. And that's what I'm going to focus on today. And that's really hard, by the way, because Whitney came from one county, I came from another county, you all might be from 10 other counties, right? And it is a little different, but there's some basic things that are mandated by law, rule, administrative code, all kinds of things. So we're going to try to focus on those kind of basic parts. All right, so next slide is kind of that breakdown, especially around waiver services. So it's important to understand, why can't everybody have a waiver, right? Just give them waivers. It all sounds great. The bottom line is that, each county raises the money. In order to have a waiver, you need to have matching state/local dollars. So you can see right here that our funding sources, what we're coming up with a match for a waiver, comes from all of these things. We have We have the waiver funding, hold on, other funding source. So if you look at one person's waiver, is pretty much how I think you should probably look at it. I'm still learning this form, by the way. We have services, 72, this is actually regarding all services, community and local services and waiver services. So you'll see 72% of the funds come from local property taxpayer dollars that you are all paying at your local level or the homeowner in your area is paying. 2%, I have to move my screen around because I can't really read it. 2% are coming from miscellaneous, but then 14% is the federal revenue. So when you see that federal revenue, that's mostly money that the federal government is giving us towards HCBS waivers. Okay, so that's why that's there. 6% is coming from the Department of DD. They pitch in some money also, and mostly towards those waivers. And then that last 6% just says other local revenue. So we're getting, so all except for the green and the light blue is coming pretty much from your local community somehow or other. Okay, either through property tax dollars, donations, whatever. That's the whole picture. Now so that's a way to look at how important local property tax dollars are. And so that is sometimes why you'll see a little difference from one county to another, because obviously property values and levies have different outcomes and different amounts they're bringing in 88 different counties. So the waiver matches similar to that. It's more around the 55 to 60% is local taxpayer dollars, and then the rest is come up by the state and the federal government. You can see that county boards collected $1.17 billion in property taxes in 2024, about 5% of total property taxes statewide. So it seems like a lot of money when you say $1.17 billion, but it's only actually 5% of the total that you're actually paying in property taxes when you look at a statewide perspective. So it is a lot of money. It supports a lot of people. Right now, I think about 42 to 45,000 Whitney people on waivers, maybe across the state. And like I said, a large predominant number of that is being paid by local property tax dollars. So thank you to all of you. I think it's important to know this stuff because we got to kind of figure out, like, we all know that we want less property tax, but we also got to understand which ones are really important, why they're important, and why did Ohio start doing this? Because it's not how other states do it, right? A lot of states have it all coming from the state within the state budget, and the state gives that money to pay for those services. In Ohio, county boards were founded in 1967, and they were created because there was no set system to support people with disabilities. There was the kind of more on the federal level. We offered alternatives. There was state-run institutions, and we were wanting other alternatives. So we wanted to create more opportunities and promote ways for people to live in their community and participate in the community. Every one of those 88 county boards are governed locally by the family members and individuals receiving services that are on their boards of directors, and then other professionals. Today, more than half of the board members on county board, the 88 county boards board of directors, have lived experience or are family members. So again, we're super thankful to family members and people with disabilities for speaking up to continue to give great services that we do in Ohio. So when we think about property tax revenue, one really wonderful thing that has come out of the way that Ohio decided to set up this is that it does provide stability and flexibility for locally funded services. We have been very blessed in Ohio to have a lot of ability to support people with disabilities, both at the local level, and then eventually we tried to maximize the effect of those local dollars by matching it up with Medicaid, state, and federal dollars. If there were some changes to property tax, it could really affect our ability to give Medicaid matching funds to hence have more waivers, right? Or continue to serve the waivers that we are continuing. And therefore, it would really affect our county board service capacity. I mean, we haven't had waiting lists per se since we did the big fix the list back in 2017-ish, but we are hearing of some counties that are looking at waiting lists again due to an ability to pass some levies, property taxes not being, being based on outdated numbers of the property value, all kinds of reasons. Its local funding reductions cannot easily be replaced by state or federal funding. That certainly is what would have to happen eventually if for some reason we were not able to raise funds through property taxes, but there would need to be quite a bit of discussion and process on how to do that. The money, what they say, Whitney, the money has to come from somewhere. So right now we're collecting the majority of those matching funds through local property tax levies that go for local county board of DD. But if that stops for some reason, which there is a lot of political talk about that, there would have to be a change to everything, the state budget, all kinds of changes. So, and of course, our fear would be that funding changes might impact services available to people with developmental disabilities. So it's just important to start understanding all this. We haven't talked a lot about this, but we're trying to make sure that people understand a lot more about how these services are funded. Is there any questions about what I said? And I probably won't be able to answer, but I'm happy to take them. We have people on staff that specifically come and talk about this stuff. So if there's any questions, I don't see any in the Q&A, but I could be wrong. Doesn't look like it. Okay, I'm going to keep moving. If you think of something later as we talk, feel free to go ahead and put it in the chat box. Happy to answer. Just wanted to take a deep breath and answer. All right. So, I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, you guys called us and said we want to learn about, waivers and DD, and that your wishes are very common to the overall state because we are getting lots and lots and lots of calls from, professional organizations, from families, from people with disabilities that are literally, I used to work the eligibility line, and take those first calls from people. And what we're hearing now from folks and stakeholders and yourselves are, I need a waiver. The doctor or the hospital told me that to get a waiver and I want to get a waiver. And, or maybe it's like, why does so-and-so Joe have a waiver? But when my child's needs are so much more than that person's. Or the other thing that we are hearing a lot of right now is I need Medicaid for my son or daughter. And I think the only way I can do it is if I get a waiver. Okay, so these are hot topics all over the state. And I want you to know as a fellow parent, and Whitney doesn't have a person with a disability, but she certainly understands. She's been in the field. We all understand why everybody's asking. We have a lot of people with significant needs out there, and it seems like a solid thing to grab onto, that it's supposed to help, right? And your concerns and you're asking for it is absolutely perfect. And I'm glad you're reaching out to the county boards because we want to know, especially if there has not been a connection before. But having said that, I think it's important to understand a little bit more about some of the dilemmas with the way that we're asking or what might happen instead of just getting a waiver. It's a process. As you all know, Medicaid is a process, and waiver is run completely by Medicaid. We follow all Medicaid rules. That's what it is. So I'm just going to give you a little bit. I did this for a parents training that I did in a county a few months ago. And I want you to know, as I'm saying this more as a parent, this has nothing to do with rules, right? This is a parent and somebody who worked in the eligibility department at a county board. When somebody calls and says, I need a waiver, the first thing that county should do is say, oh, thank you for calling. Can we talk about what you're really looking for? What are you looking for a waiver to do? Because a waiver is a funding source. It doesn't come with any set automatic services, automatic anything. It's just you still have to identify what is the need. And we cannot authorize anything on a waiver that does not have a true assessed need. So the first thing when somebody tells you you should look for a waiver, or you're thinking I want to look for a waiver, is to start thinking, what do I really need as a family member? Do I need daycare? Do I need a respite option? What is respite? Maybe you don't even know what respite is, right? And maybe the call is, I don't know. Maybe I need respite. Maybe I need, does my loved one need personal care? Does my loved one need, special equipment? Do they need camp? I mean, there's just so many things as a parent that your child might need. So we want to know what you need, because some of those things, there might be a better, quicker, easier, more efficient, more effective way to meet that need, or it might actually end up being a waiver. So I say that obviously a lot. For what? For what? And for what, right? I'm just trying to drive that thing. We really want to know, what are the needs? So it might be better to call and say, I have a child with disabilities and I'm really concerned. I'm struggling with A, B, and C, right? That's the good conversation to have. So again, the comparison of, I said, what do you need that you don't have, instead of thinking Joe has a waiver and I don't have a waiver. We're going to have to backtrack to, what do you need that you currently are not receiving? That's where we have to start at. It has nothing to do with Joe or anything, because we serve people from 0 to, I think 101 is our oldest person right now, across the state. So, and then I do want to clarify, I need Medicaid for my son or daughter. Can't you just get me a waiver? I mean, this is probably one of the most heart-wrenching things that county boards, SSAs, intake specialists deal with. If we could figure out a way to do it, we would do it. But this is absolutely one of the worst things that we can do. And I'm not saying it's never happened, but it is literally, if a person giving waivers for Medicaid healthcare is not legal. It's a basic thing of CMS. Waivers are a funding source for an assessed need, and there has to be a chronic long-term need for waiver services, not for Medicaid, but for waiver services. And you need to receive those waiver services at least monthly. And waiver services are not the same thing as Medicaid services, even though they are a Medicaid service. They're not the same. Regular Medicaid is a health benefit, insurance benefit. So there is lots of work for those of you families, or if you talk to other families. We would love to advocate for a way in Ohio for families with disabilities to receive Medicaid health insurance due to some kind of qualifying disability. And there's groups that are looking at ways that we can bring that to Ohio. Some other states have programs like that. Whitney is actually on a work group that's going to be looking at some of those options. Because if health insurance is really what you need, then that's really what we want you to get. Because the waiver isn't necessarily helpful. We don't have the same kind of services sometimes. So that's just kind of a caveat. Like, we know it's an issue out there, and here's some of the stuff that we want you to know we're trying to deal with. So let's talk more about that assessed needs. Because meeting a person's needs has many different ways. We do it in a lot of different ways. And as I had mentioned, when I worked for the county boards, I worked in information and referral / eligibility. And that was probably the number one thing that, when people would call and say whatever they said, right? If they say, I need a waiver, or I need help with this, or I need this, or I heard there was a great service here. The very first thing that we're going to look at is, okay, let's see if you're even eligible for our services, so that we can start that process. And then parallel, at the same time, what are your needs? So that while we're determining whether you're eligible, we might be able to give you information to go and talk to this other community resource. A lot of people call us with questions around Social Security, employment, school issues. These are the very first calls. Finding good daycares is certainly probably one of them. And sometimes our counties have resources, well, always for Social Security, always for employment, always for mental health services, and usually for school-related services. We have resources that we can get you connected to very quickly around those. At least try and help you. But they have nothing to do with our services, and they have nothing to do with waivers. So a lot of times we're trying to meet those needs on that original call with just information and referral. But at the same time, we might say, oh, you are eligible. okay, because you're eligible, you're also eligible for some other things. Or, hey, we don't even have you in our system. Let me give you these resources that are on the outside of our system, and let's start the process with becoming eligible in our system. So it's super important to let that work, to let that information and referral work, because you can come to the county boards for 101 years at this point and look for eligibility. And if your main issue is that you want to get Social Security, let's get Social Security for this family. And then if you also have time to go through eligibility and all that stuff, then we're going to work on that. But like, what we want for you is to get what you need. So employment, help, Social Security, even Medicaid. We have a lot of our counties have Medicaid liaisons that will help out with some of that. So we really want you to work through the information and referral process as much as you can. If you are eligible, then that next thing down is family support services. This is usually, and I will say, I used to be able to say 88 counties had family support services, which is a set dollar amount for eligible folks who live with their families that helps with whatever you might need based on your disability. With the current climate of financial climate, I can't say that we're going to have 88 counties with family support services anymore. And I see, Whitney, you are agreeing with me, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So they might look different. They might do different things with that. That service used to be funded by the State Department of DD, and it stopped a long time ago. And so the county boards picked up that out of those property taxes. But now that we are the mandatory match for waivers, the majority of our funding needs to go towards those waiver match funds. So some of our local services are actually diminishing right now.
And
We
with
also
those, just
might-
to add that, you know, there's different eligibility criteria based on each county as well. So that's another
Yeah,
thing.
different amounts, different eligibility criteria. Sometimes it's income based, sometimes it's not, all that kind of stuff. So we can help you out. Whitney and I have our contact information at the, if you ever need help connecting with your county board, but you can still kind of use those kind of words like family support services and ask them, and they usually know what that means. Service coordination is actually part of the rule. So if somebody is determined eligible for county board services and you are wanting a service coordinator, you can certainly ask for that. Sometimes counties might have service coordinators who have larger caseloads, but not with waiver folks. So like it might be for children in schools and doing that, and they'll follow you along, be there for when you need them, contact you, but they still do have to assign a service coordinator if you would like one. And then ultimately based after that, a lot of times, I mean, in the regular realm of things, you normally would go through like information referral and then maybe family support dollars, and then you would maybe get a service coordinator. And then ultimately you and the service coordinator would realize, wow, there's a lot of needs that are not being met by your second column, community resources, family and friends. County board local dollars cannot, are not helping. So then that kind of gets you to that end process where we say, hey, this person has an assessed need for more than what we can currently support at the local level. Let's go to waiver funding. That's how we've run this for the past 5 years, 6 years, 10 years, 20 years. I can tell you that there's been a lot more requests to go straight to the waiver process. And we can certainly do that because in rural, we have to help you out with that if that's what you ask. But I will say that my experience personally as a parent has been that it's best to work your way through those processes and make sure that you're accessing community where you can, or accessing local county board dollars or programs that the local county board are, because a lot of those services are tailored to your community. They help people be inclusive and part of their community. And that if you start with the waiver process and then work backwards, it gets a lot stickier. I'm just going to leave it. Is that fair to say, Whitney? But it does happen. And I got you, I'm not saying it doesn't. So, all right. I'm going to go quickly through these because I want time for the waiver stuff. So these are just services. These are all the services that a county board might have available from 3 to 5. And if I put them without an asterisk, then it's available in some ways. Although I need to add an asterisk to family support services. That's pretty hot, recent changes that people are doing. But information and referral is always, if you're eligible, is always available, and service coordination is always available. There is also, oh, I kind of messed that up. I got to fix this slide. Don't send this out, Mark. I should have put the school programs and behavior support are going to be up under service coordination. Many counties still have school programs, and many have other kind of unique programs for 3 to 5 year olds. They might have story hour at a thing. They might have behavior support assistance. They might work with a daycare. I mean, there's all kinds of things that they might do at 3 to 5. But then, of course, waitlist assessments and waiver administration is possible for age 3 to 5. It's not frequent, I will admit, because it is a funding source, and we usually have to look through other type of resources that might be available for that group. But it definitely, there are a few kids across the state that have worked their way through that process and have waivers. So I do need to fix that slide a bit. So then we have the ages of 6 to 21, which of course probably affect a lot of you also. And again, we've got family support services usually. We have service coordination available. We have information and referral available. And there's a lot more local programs that might be going on for those school age groups. Some examples might be they might have a behavior support specialist to help kind of navigate or train different people at the schools, at daycares, in the home. A lot of self-advocacy programs starting during that time period that are funded by the county boards. Obviously, Special Olympics starts at age 8 usually. That funding might be coming from the county boards, or it might just be like in kind and volunteer work, but we definitely work with Special Olympics a lot. Lots of counties have a lot of programs starting at transition age, like travel training, and employment stuff. I already mentioned school programs. So now we're getting into the waitlist assessment again. And of course, we can always ask for a waitlist assessment during this age time. And there could be waiver administration if somebody ends up getting a waiver during this time. And the kind of services that are available for this age group, and I just kind of, I mean, there's an exhaustive list on the Department of DD, but I did put some of the ones that most people use of children. So we might have homemaker personal care, which is personal care in either your home or in the community. There could be services around transportation, assistive tech, remote support. Mark and I were just talking about that before you all came in. Respite services, environmental accessibility and home mods, or participant-directed goods and services are on 2 of the waivers, and that has been very helpful for a lot of people. So those are the kind of services that we have for that age group. And then, of course, we've got the young adult to adult services. It's very similar. I'm not going to read everything for you. But remembering, I guess I want to point out on this one that we have the same services, but we also have to remember that for adults with disabilities, we lose children's services as a collaborative partner. And so if there's any concerns about abuse and neglect, the county board becomes the primary kind of, I don't want to say enforcer because that sounds really bad, but if we get a call to a hotline saying that somebody's worried about a person with disabilities being abused or neglected, that's the responsibility of the county board now to investigate that until they're over 60, when it might go to aging or us. We still have waitlist assessment waivers and waivers, and I put a much more exhaustive list of services that might be appropriate for an adult to use on the waiver. And then, of course, I already mentioned all the kind of things that they might provide with local resources, behavior support, self-advocacy training, Special Olympics. There's all kinds of stuff. So it's super important to find out what other services besides waiver are going on at your local county board, and even giving them ideas of what they might do, because we're at a time now where we're going to have to prioritize those services, and we want to make sure we keep the ones that are helpful to families when we have to make some hard decisions. So, all right, I see I got a question. Let's see if it's an easy one. So, oh, good, Teresa. What value does the OACB add to us as IDD persons and families in Ohio? And how much money does it take away from the county boards? Well, I certainly can't answer how much money it takes away because I would need to bring that in, but I will definitely route you to Adam Herman, who's the head of our OACB, if that's something we can share out. I would say the value, and I mean, OACB represents all 88 counties and works very hard to have as much consistency as possible across the state and identifies things for advocacy for both people with disabilities, for the county boards, and they provide a lot of, I think our pillars are professional development, technical assistance, advocacy, and what's the other one, Whitney? I don't know. So, we definitely are an intermediary between the State Department. You can imagine the State Department having 88 counties tell them how they want things done. And obviously the State Department writes rules that are supposed to be the same for everybody. And we have 88 counties doing that. So our role is definitely trying to make sure that the ask to the department is reasonable and middle of the road and represents all 88 counties versus a few. So thanks for asking. All right. So we're going to go into the waiver process at this point. And you know, there is a process. The waivers are not, unfortunately, they're not just go and ask for one and get it. It starts with asking for a waitlist assessment, or being very clear that you have needs that you feel are unmet and are needs that could be met by the funding that the waiver allows you to have. So the easiest way to do it is to specifically ask for a waitlist assessment, because once that happens, there's some pretty specific guidelines for the county board to follow. About I think a 45-day window, Whitney. Is that what we're looking at with the waitlist assessment these days? I'd have to brush up.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
45 days.
And then you'll get the waiting list result from the assessment to find out. And I'm going to talk about that on the next slide. Once you get to the waiting list result, if you are eligible for a waiver and have an immediate need, or the county is meeting a current need, then you have to go through the Medicaid eligibility process, then the level of care process, which is all Medicaid rules, which we have nothing to do with and have very little control over, to be quite honest. And then we can start actually having the waiver. So it is a process no matter what. So we're going to break those down. So the waiting list assessment, here's a couple things about it. Generally, waivers are considered as an option after other community resources have been explored. And that's just because it makes sense. If somebody calls and says that they need daycare for their 5-year-old, the first thing we're going to do at the county board is we often have information about daycares that have traditionally met the needs of folks with disabilities well. And so we want to find out more about what the needs of your child are. And depending on those needs, we may have some ideas of community resources that might be a potential to look into. Again, just because we're trying to always keep people, there's no real daycare service on the a waiver service. There's personal care, but personal care for a 5-year-old looks a lot different than what personal care for a 25-year-old. And so having providers and understanding what you do for that's daycare versus personal care is completely, we're still trying to figure all that out. Part of the waitlist assessment process is to identify these community resources that might meet the needs. We want to identify the needs, and then we want to figure out ways to meet the need. Anything that a county board offers locally is considered one of those community resources. So if the county board has family support dollars and they can help, or local dollars that they're willing to dedicate towards daycare / personal care / respite, whatever the need is, then we need to go through the process of identifying that we're going to use the local county boards for that. Also, a lot of times our needs, like I said earlier, are not actually needs that are met by a waiver. So it's important during the waitlist assessment to find out what that is. If it is, ABA therapy, or if it is mental health counseling services or whatever, then we need to make sure we know that so that we can document how we're helping, how the community at large is helping with that. And it's really important to note that things have changed over the past 3 to 4 years. There are a lot more county boards that are willing to authorize local dollars in limited amounts to kind of try out those waiver services, to see if that's really what you're looking for. You can even use a waiver provider sometimes. And every county is a little different at what they can authorize with those local dollars. So all that is going to have to be documented in the waitlist assessment. So sometimes a county might say, well, we can do a waitlist assessment, but I can tell you right now, it's going to come out this way, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And that's frustrating. Like, I'm a parent. I get that. Like, that is very frustrating. But it often it's true. It will come out that way because they know that we have to try out all these other resources first. So bear with us. We're trying to be better. There was recent changes in the waitlist assessment rule, and I think we're really trying hard to make sure that counties do the waitlist assessment when people want it. But you do need to know that that's part of the waitlist assessment process, is to look at other resources and document how they're able to meet the need. So when you have a waitlist, let's say you have it and you have it scheduled, there's going to be 3 potential outcomes to the waitlist. There will be either, number 1, no unmet need, which is also very frustrating as a parent, because I have needs all the time that are unmet, and I have a very large support network and I still have unmet needs, right? Like, it sounds a little demeaning, but in the realm of a waiver waitlist assessment, for whatever reasons, it might come out that the needs are being met by community resources, by family, by neighbors, by local county board dollars, whatever that is. So there is a chance of it coming back no unmet need, especially the more we do before we look into some of those things. Current need means that there may be a need within the next 12 months. So when the waitlist, this particular rendition of the waiting list assessment came out, it was coming off of a very long 40,000 person wait list for plus, I think. And so current need meant, well, they don't need a waiver like in 30 days, but this person's graduating from school in 9 months and they're thinking they might need it. So that was kind of the intent of that current need group. With the newer waiting list rule, I think more people will be coming out as a current need. But there's also it still does not mean that you get one within the next 30 days. And there still is something in the rule that says that it doesn't guarantee that you get it within the next 12 months, even if you have a current need. Because again, that all goes back to the finances of the local county that you're at and whether they have waivers that they can give out and whether the need is still actually there. So lots of things will happen in the current need list that may or may not mean that you actually get a waiver within the next 12 months. Immediate need, I think that's fairly obvious. There's a health and safety reason why the person needs the waiver within the next 30 days. And at this point, county boards are mandated to authorize that and get a waiver moving within 30 days. And they work with the Department of DD on those other steps of Medicaid eligibility and level of care, making sure that you meet all those criteria. There is a chance that something could break down after that if they don't meet Medicaid eligibility or they do not pass level of care, that there could be a delay in that. So that's a little confusing too, but generally we meet immediate needs within 30 days, according to rule. All right, I bet we got some questions, Whitney. Oh, there we go. Oh, good, Mark. So we don't have questions because Mark put in that wonderful pillars, the pillars of OACB: advocacy, communications, professional development, and technical assistance. So, and then
there is one more in the.
There is one more.
Okay.
Oh. Can you see that one? I can read it too.
I got it. Let's see. It's coming up. There we go. So what does someone do when the child is assessed to have immediate need, but the waiver is not implemented within those 30 days? Who's responsible? That I have no idea. A case by case, the responsibility often might be around the fact of Medicaid eligibility and or level of care. So I would need to know specifics, but certainly they should reach out to their county board. And if they're not getting the answers that they need, there is always the availability to go to the superintendent of the county board and or to the Department of DD. So, all right.
I have a question too, just out of curiosity. So how often are the I guess the inquiries or applications submitted due to like a change in like who the person in need might be living with, or like a death of a parent or something like, does that happen a lot when that, or is that initiated a lot for that reason?
Definitely. I mean, when if somebody is working actively with an SSA and anybody on the team finds out that there's a huge change in, life circumstances, they can at any point ask for that waitlist assessment and move through that fairly quickly. The dilemma comes when people aren't actively engaged with SSAs or the county board, and we don't always know that that's happening until it's gotten, we need somebody to reach out and tell us that. So there's not, Whitney, is there a routine schedule that waitlist assessments are supposed to be redone, or is it just simply on
No,
request?
usually it would be some type of conversation that might trigger a new need. And so maybe that waiver no longer, so if they're on a waiver, that waiver maybe will no longer meet that need. And so they would do a new wait list assessment for that purpose. Other than that, it might be that the local resources and funding are no longer meeting the need. And so then that would trigger a need to do a wait list assessment at that point. So again, like with your example of someone who's has a aging caregiver or someone who's passed away, that would normally be an immediate response to go do a waiting list assessment. And more than likely, if there's no other supports available, that would lead to a waiver enrollment to support that person. So.
And
Did I
this would
answer
be
did we
basic.
answer your question, Mark?
Oh, yeah, I think so.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
And so you're always looking for, or at least after you determine that the need is there, it looks like from your chart, then you're looking at Medicaid eligibility, right?
Yep.
So
Yes.
that's just an absolute.
That's a separate, yeah. So
Yeah,
they would
and-
apply
and-
for Medicaid separately if they don't currently have Medicaid.
Got it.
Yeah, that's a perfect. So Medicaid eligibility is non-negotiable for a waiver. It has to be, people have to be eligible for Medicaid. If they aren't, local county boards try to do whatever they can with local funds to figure that out, which does happen sometimes even with adults, obviously, who for some reason are not eligible. But usually it's because they have other resources, which then is a matter of either spending down those resources or figuring out and making a plan. But yeah, the Medicaid eligibility has to be handled by each 88 county board of Department of Job and Family Services. And that is a process that has to go through every 12 months. Many counties have a liaison with their local JFS that helps that go fairly streamlined. I mean, my son and Lucas, obviously, Lucas was one that has a JFS worker in-house that does all the developmental disabilities waivers and reauthorizing. So it's a fairly streamlined process. I mean, I still have to put in the paperwork. I still have to do all that stuff. But I have one person to talk to, which is really nice. So it's important to ask your local county board if they have a liaison either at the JFS offices or within their place that they could route you to ask specific questions regarding DD eligibility. Let's see, it is impacted by a lot of things. Things are different for children than adults. Obviously, income comes into mind, and resources and assets. And I will say a common misnomer is that children have to be Medicaid eligible before they get a waiver. That is not true. The fact that they have an immediate need or a current need and the county is authorizing a waiver, then makes them eligible for long-term care services. So that if you guys ever hear a county say, well, your family makes too much money to give your 14-year-old a waiver, you need to ask more questions. That is incorrect information. Once somebody has been determined in need of long-term services, that 14-year-old, their assets are only about their assets instead of the family's. The next step in there was level of care. Level of care assessment is conducted to determine which residential placement the individual is entitled to receive. So this is a CMS federal requirement that a level of care is completed. It's really important to understand that the level of care, a person has to have a level of care, which means nursing facility or intermediate care facility for a person with IDD. That's what ICF-IDD stands. You have to have that level of care in order to get a waiver. But what you're really doing is saying, because I have that facility-based level of care need, I am opting to waive my entitlement to an institutional residential placement, and I'm choosing to receive long-term services and supports through a home and community-based services. So you kind of got to prove that you would meet the institutional level of care. This is very backward. It's very old. I'm sorry I'm saying words like institution. I hate this, but this is where this is coming from CMS, the federal, regulations, that a waiver is in lieu of being institutionalized. And so, that's why you can't do both, right? We can't live in an institution with a waiver. You are basically saying, I meet the level of care to go into either a nursing facility or an intermediate care facility, but I want my child, I want personally to live out in the community and be supported through a waiver. That's what the level of care purpose is. Along those same lines, this is the beginning of the waiver. So it's important for that person that isn't meeting the needs, that isn't getting the waiver within 30 days, to find out where they are in this process. Is it held up at Medicaid eligibility? Is it held up at level of care? Because the level of care is reviewed. It's done by the County Board of DD, but then it's reviewed by the Department of DD and approved ultimately by the State Department of DD. They are responsible for those reviews and making that. So we got to find out where the slowdown is in the process.
So does that level of care then, it takes into consideration family members available, that type of stuff?
It really doesn't. It's not like our DDP, which is what the developmental disabilities profile that talks about that, of how much a family can help. It's strictly about the person's disabilities and
Okay.
whether or not they have at least 3 substantial. It's very similar to our eligibility. So most people meet level of care. I mean, there's a few fine differences, but if they're eligible for county board services, then they probably will meet level of care. The dilemma comes when somebody comes in and they want a waiver immediately and they don't really want to go through the county board's eligibility. They may not meet level of care, and they've already gone through the waitlist assessment. So it's a little confusing if we don't go through the right process. That's kind of that sticky part I was talking about earlier. All right, so let's say you got through the level of care and now you're eligible for a waiver. There's 3 types of waivers: the level 1 waiver, the IO waiver, and the SELF waiver. IO stands for Individual Options Waiver. And you can read, all of them. You have to be eligible for Medicaid, but again, children and adults who should be viewed only by themselves, not with a family, a roommate, or anything else. So they're usually okay for Medicaid unless they have certain kinds of trusts or inheritance or something that has not been put into some kind of a special needs safety net for them. They all have to have a level of care, and they all need to have at least be needing one level 1 waiver service. And I know it doesn't say this here, but it really should be on at least a monthly basis. The Department of DD sends us reports of anybody that is not receiving waiver services after, I think, 3 to 6 months. You got to get them off the waiver. They're going to be so it's a constant to kick somebody off a waiver, not kick them off. I shouldn't say it like that, but to try to figure out, like, why does this person have a waiver if they're not having services? That's the big question. There's no age requirements for any of the waivers. There are caps on the level 1 waiver, a cap amount for both the level 1 and the SELF waiver have a children's amount versus an adult, and I don't have those on here. I don't know why.
Is it 40?
Around 45
for a child?
Yeah, for both of those,
Okay.
and then 60 some for an adult on level 1 or SELF waiver. The IO does not have a cap. It's based on the needs of the person, and that's where that comes in. If what will happen is either the SSA or the waiver, the waitlist assessment person will help determine, based on those needs, which waiver makes the most sense, right, for somebody. And that's an area that sometimes there might be an appeal or something, like maybe the county says, I think a level 1 waiver would fit the needs of this 14-year-old person. And maybe for some reason, somebody on the team, the family, or somebody might feel like that person needs an IO waiver. So that would be a potential discussion to have, go through it, and then you could certainly appeal, that you thought you needed a different waiver. But I will say that generally a lot of people get level 1 waivers unless we know that they need close to 24/7 care. You'll
And
start with a
again,
level
that's
1
where you
yourself.
can, reassess through the waitlist
Yes.
assessment. If you get a level 1 and it's not meeting the needs, that it doesn't have enough funding to meet those needs, then you can reassess through the waiting list assessment. So,
Yeah, and that seems to work well. I mean, I know I might sound like everything is hard, but people move from a level 1 to an IO. We don't have problems with that, right? Like you can do that. You can show that there's more need, especially if somebody is consistently maxing out, their level 1 waiver. And there's a assess need documented that there's more. And certainly when an emergency happens, Mark, like you had talked about earlier with somebody in the family passing away, moving out, whatever, then that's when people are moving from a level 1 to an IO waiver often.
For people this is kind of new for, including myself.
Mhm.
Can you give us an example of like maybe a couple level 1 services,
Sure.
a
Yeah.
couple IO services?
Sure. Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, they all are they're mirroring each other very, very closely these days. There was a time where the goal was to get down to 2 waivers, because it was a little confusing having all these 3 different options, and so we had spent quite a while kind of trying to get the level 1 and the self waiver to kind of look like each other, so maybe we could merge them, but that has become a lower priority of recent, and so there's no talk of doing that right now. But so a level 1 waiver is often going to be for somebody I mean, I can tell you why it was developed. It was developed to take the place of school for adults. When the level 1 came out, it was made specifically with the idea that graduates maybe they want to still live with their family, or maybe they're capable of living semi-independently in the community, but they're going to need more job training. They're going to need someplace to go during the day, things like that. And so they kind of developed the level 1 waiver, which was like, we still have a lot of support from family, community, or our own skills, the person's skills. And so, but they still do need help, some check-ins. So we developed this originally to pay for day programming, job coaching, things like that, with just a little bit of respite or personal care. During COVID, we freed up the pots where the pots of money underneath the level 1, and made it so you could use it for whatever you want. So it doesn't anymore have to be used only for day programming, and that a lot of the money was tied up under that before. Now you can use it for anything. So people could be using it certainly for 5 days a week, up to, if there's an assessed need, 5 days a week of day programming, job coaching, to get a job follow along if they're working out in the community, and still get probably, anywhere from 5 hours a week of personal care, up until, if you're not using it for all the day programming and all those other things, you might get up to 25 or 30 hours a week of personal care, unless you're using a lot on home mods, or if you're, so now you can kind of like pick and choose, what is the most important assessed need of this person and what do they really need. So my son actually has a self waiver, and he's an adult now, but he certainly uses it only for a respite type camp, some assistive tech equipment, and about 25 hours a week of personal care that he goes out into the community for, doing things on his own. He doesn't get any kind of job support or day programming. So, that changes if you're using a lot of high cost things like transportation or home mods. That can change what it might look like. But the kind of services, so pretty much the level 1 and self have pretty much the same services. The only service probably that is really important to think about an IO waiver, other than the increased amount of money available, is nursing services waiver. Nursing is on a IO. What else, Whitney, are different services? I think it's important to
yeah,
say.
they've really kind of aligned a lot of the services throughout the 3 waivers at this point. So It really more so is the funding amounts, I would say, was where it differs. And so we did have a question
Okay.
about, can the IO waiver fund 24/7 care for an individual? And so again, that would be like your DDP range, which is the developmental disability profile range, that determines funding levels for the IO waiver. So I would say if a person has 24/7 care needs, then likely that DDP would have picked up on that, and that would fund care for that amount of time. Now we are looking at a new assessment tool called the NRI, and that's a whole nother session. But with that, they're hopeful that that will better assess the needs of an individual to kind of determine what those needs really look like for that person. So a lot more to come on that. But currently we use the DDP, and that's what determines the funding range for an IO waiver and would determine whether or not someone would have enough funding to support 24/7 care.
Yeah. And again, it's all coming back to that assess need. So, and I mean, I'm going to tell you the budgets, the funding ranges right now on the IO waiver don't support squat, to be quite honest, because they're outdated, right? Which is why we're getting the inter-RI. So will you potentially have to go to through the prior auth process, which the Department of DD is involved in? If you had 24/7, absolutely, you might have to, especially it depends if you're sharing services. It depends what all, it depends on a lot of criteria. But many prior, and I think they told us like 95% or 97% of the prior auths get approved. So because they know that we never changed those ranges based on provider rate increases or anything, and we're going to the DDP, or I'm sorry, we'll be going to the inter-RI. They're not going to make changes at this point. We just send everything through PA that we have to. So.
And we are about at
Yeah.
107 now.
Sorry, I'm always late. I talk too much.
I'll just mention for anyone who's got a 1 o'clock individual guidance session, we may just be a little bit late for that, just
Thank you.
in case they happen to be on here. Yeah.
I think I'm actually really close to the last slides. The last thing I wanted to talk about, I think, was just that, remembering that Medicaid waivers come with responsibility. The only way, you have to work with the service and support administrator. We have responsibilities regarding monitoring both the provider of the services and the health and safety of the individual that's receiving services. It's important that you know that you have to stay eligible for Medicaid. County boards help with that a lot. But it is important to do that. We have to follow all the Medicaid HCBS rules, which include around behavior supports and rights restrictions and settings rules, which have been hot topics the last couple of years, which is why I brought those two up. But there's lots of rules. Have to use the waiver on a regular basis. And one of the basic core tenets of CMS is to look at least costly alternative and most cost-efficient way to meet needs. I don't know that we've been really great at that. I'm going to be honest. But it is definitely a big conversation at the federal level, not just Ohio, to figure out how we can serve people, which as a mom, I struggle with because, sometimes the least costly alternative is not the best for my child. But the Medicaid rules are the Medicaid rules. So we are working towards that. I think people will be hearing more about that. And, we're working really hard to continue to give really good quality services to people throughout their lifespan, keeping in mind that, we do serve people past 100 now. That's our new thing, our claim to fame, right, Whitney? So, which I'm so excited. I can't believe they didn't invite me to the birthday party of that person. I really wanted to go. We have a woman, I think, on the west side of the state.
Montgomery County, there's someone, right?
Yeah. And then we have somebody on the east side of the state that might live in a group home, but they both are over 100 now. So anyways, I know there's probably more you guys could do. I know you have DRO coming next time, and they'll be able to give you all kinds of answers, especially. I do want to clarify that there is a county board resolution complaint process, even if you're being authorized locally funded services. There's still an appeal process that you can go through if you're not happy with that or you feel like you need more. That rule is going through right now, so you can look it up and read it. And then of course, DRO will talk about like if you're unhappy with any kind of authorizations, reductions, or we're supposed to give due process anytime we change services. Doesn't matter if we're adding services, decreasing services, keeping services the exact same, we're supposed to give due process out. So DRO will give you all the hot tips on that process, I'm sure. So, and I'm happy to come back anytime.
Well, thank you. This is very informative. Thanks for answering my questions and the others. So Lisa and Whitney, appreciate you taking the time on a Monday and sharing your insights with us. Maybe we'll have you back sometime soon.
Absolutely. Thank
Sounds
you
good.
so much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Have a good week.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.